Okay, are we ready to start the board meeting? Okay. Welcome, everybody. I would like to call the March 25th, 2019 New York State Hearing Aid Dispensing Advisory Board meeting to order. Okay, so I'm going to go through the agenda, and we'll start with introductions. We'll start with Albany. Mark, why don't you start?
I'm Mark Mastrobuono, Department of State.
Denise Tidings, Department of State.
Marcy Rose, Department of State.
Jody DeLallo, Department of State.
I'm Amy Pensamine, Department of State.
Lawrence Butler, Consumer Member.
Can they hear?
Eric
New York,
Freeman,
can you hear?
Registered dispenser.
Yes, we can hear you in New York.
Okay.
Okay, New York City.
Anna Kim, representing ENT.
Anthony Massara, dispensing audiologist.
Terry Bergman, Consumer Representative.
Peter Fisher, dispenser.
Janetta Shapiro, dispensing audiologist.
Arnita Gant, Department of State.
Dave Mossberg, Department of State.
Buffalo.
Ann Orsini, dispensing audiologist.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the department. I believe that makes it a quorum. Am I correct, Dave?
Yep, you're correct.
Okay, we have a quorum. Yay. So now we're going to start with the department subcommittee reports. We'll start with the processing report. Jody, you can mind.
Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. Not a lot to report for the processing report. Just wanted to bring to your attention in your folders. As always, our licensing statistics. They're broken down by registration type and also broken down by counties. There's a comparison 2019 from 2018. Does not fluctuate greatly. So if that's something you're interested in seeing the breakdown, that information is in your folders. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Is there any questions? Okay, so we'll go on to the next agenda item. It's the enforcement report. Ernita?
Yes. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to share a little bit of information relative to our enforcement activity. Out of those who registered, we had 34 audits that we randomly conducted, and of that 34, only 9 of them were not fully in compliance. There were some renewals who had not taken all of the courses. Some had not taken any of the courses, but through our efforts, every one of the 9 ended up taking the courses and are now in compliance, and their renewals went through. We have about 7 audits that are still pending the review. Of our complaints, we have 6 pending complaints. Since our last hearing board meeting, we received 5 new complaints, and during that same period, we closed 3 complaints. That's my report.
Does anybody have any questions for Ernita on her reports?
Yeah, I do. What sort of complaints do we see?
Can you
Excuse me? Okay. Well, I didn't really go into the details of the complaints, and I could maybe go and look through them and have that information available at your next meeting. The only ones I would probably be able to discuss with you are the ones that are closed. The open complaints we can't comment on at this point, but I didn't get this. The only thing I did look at is the status of how the complaints were closed, and we had one where the issue in the complaint was resolved. Another one was closed, no violation, and the other two, I believe, was closed, insufficient evidence. So, and that was just the status, but I didn't write down what the actual complaints were.
Okay.
Is there a committee that reviews these complaints, or how are they addressed?
They're reviewed by our enforcement team. We have investigators that conduct the investigations. We have, if cases that are not closed during the investigation process, then they go on to our counsel who reviews them. So they're reviewed by staff with the department.
Okay, is there any other questions?
I guess kind of along Peter's questions,
I
what
think
kind
that-
of complaints?
Can you speak on the microphone?
I guess kind of going along Peter's question is, what kind of complaints? If we know what kind of complaints, we can have an open discussion among providers, dispensers, and so forth, how to minimize those issues and improve our quality of care if there's issues along that lines. Peter, is that kind of like what you're thinking about, so we know what to look for and how to help improve the care?
Well, I'd like to know who's messing up and how they're messing up. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I didn't bring and look at that information to bring to the board at this meeting, but at our next meeting, I will, and again, it will be on the cases that are closed. I will give you an idea of what type of cases, complaints that come through our office.
Okay.
At our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Works for me.
Yep. Yeah, so we'll just add that to our agenda next time for the enforcement report. We'll give you not only the stats, but we'll give you some background on the ones that are closed.
Right.
We can't talk about the ones that are open
No,
or
of course.
ongoing, but the ones that are closed will give you some background information on it. I don't know that we can give the names and everything.
No, I don't think that would be
But we can at
necessary,
least
but-
tell you about the type of complaints that we're receiving.
Right, to avoid issues and helping people understand what not to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the next topic is continuing education update. Mark?
I'd like to update everyone on the continuing education requirement for telecoil and other assistive listening devices. As you're aware, the 1 hour requirement became effective on January 1st of 2019 to include 1 hour of telecoil and other assistive listening devices in one's continuing education. Currently, there are 7 schools that are approved to offer a course that covers the 1 hour of telecoil and other assistive listening devices. This list of schools has been provided on our website with contact information for the schools. We haven't received any complaints from licensees about course availability or lack thereof. So although we expect other schools or organizations to continue to submit applications for approval to cover this 1 hour, we don't see that the number that we have right now isn't sufficiently meeting the demand for licensees. That's it. Does anyone have any questions?
You said it's on your website.
Yes. We have a Department of State page where you can select hearing aid dispenser information. On that page is a link for schools, course, and exam information. And the list of schools starts out with a list of schools that are approved for the telecom course. And then below that is a list of all schools that provide other continuing education for all the hearing aid
Do you
dispensers.
have a copy of the actual what's covered in the curriculum?
Well, it's not a set curriculum. What we look for in the 1 hour curriculum is that it does hit on telecoil, looping, and other assistive listening devices. In my experience, it appears that the courses we're approving are mostly comprised of telecoil looping, and as opposed to the other assistive listening devices, Bluetooth and other types of things. So it has been predominantly telecoil information in the curriculum.
Now, Bluetooth. Can that do some of the same things that the T-coil could do, and would that be more current?
Well, one could say that. However, from our perspective, the law states telecoil and other assistive listening devices, not telecoil or. So the course must be about telecoil and looping. And if there are other related pieces of equipment that could fall into that, then the school would have to show us how that relates to the telecoil and looping technology.
The reason I bring this up is that technology for hearing aids is moving very fast now. So perhaps you could speak on that more.
So to kind of get to the meat of that is, beside looping, the T-coil is a universal process that allows anybody that has a hearing aid with a T-coil to access the audio signal that's being presented through that system. The Bluetooth signals that are out there are often proprietary between different manufacturers. So, for example, you shared with me that you have a Starkey. And so you could have different devices that'll stream to your hearing system, okay, for one-on-one. There are some devices between the manufacturers and so forth that will stream to multiple devices. The Starkey has one, and other manufacturers have them as well. But the universal, though, is the T-coil. And my own opinion is we got to get the buildings in New York looped. And I don't know where that falls within our ability to get that information out, except through the consumer groups like HLAA to reach out maybe into the real estate or wherever that is, development, and say, let's make sure we get looped. I have a client that moved to California, and I looked up the site on the Loop USA, which shows all the listings, and within her distance of where she was, including the churches she's going to be going to, there were like 50, 60 locations that were enabled. And when I look up Binghamton, we have 7, 8, so we have a lot of room to grow for looping. But technology is definitely being driven via our phones and Bluetooth. So does that answer your question?
I just want to make sure that we're thinking ahead.
Yes, and to be clear, we would look at any subject matter related to the telecoil and consider them after review to meet this requirement. And of course, as technology emerges, I'm sure that there will be some changes to that, to the different curriculum they will accept.
So this is wonderful, what you're doing.
Thank you.
May I say something? This is Peter.
Sure. Hi, Peter.
The technology involved with looping is fairly complex because you have to put it in the ceiling or underneath the floor. It takes a lot of manpower, a lot of thinking, and there may be people who are looking ahead, realize that Bluetooth technology is the technology of the future, and so they're not going to expend a lot of time and money putting loops in when they can see that more and more hearing aids are becoming Bluetooth compatible, and that somewhere pretty close down the road it would be easy for everyone to put a Bluetooth transmitter in rather than a physical wire that has to go around the whole building.
Well, this is Jerry Bergman in New York. I'd just like to comment on what my colleague just said. There are no comparisons between Bluetooth and hearing induction loops. Bluetooth is a one-to-one form of technology. It's not suitable for use in a large hall, in a church, in a lecture hall, in an auditorium, in a theater, in the same way that a hearing loop is. A hearing loop, once installed, is permanent. If it's done during the course of construction or renovation, it's relatively cheap. Hundreds and hundreds of churches throughout the country have installed hearing loops. Where there's a will, there's a way, and what we find through the Hearing Loss Association is that when people get together who have hearing loss and would like a hearing loop, there are ways to get the hearing loops funded and installed. They don't require any syncing as Bluetooth does each time you want to use it. The effective range is hundreds and hundreds of feet. The larger the area, the more complex a hearing loop installation becomes. But presently, there is no technology that has been shown superior to hearing loops for large area listening systems. Sennheiser and others in Europe are experimenting with new technology, but they have not been able to overcome the latency issue, which means that you're not hearing what's being spoken in anything close to real time. There's a pause. Of course, we don't know what's coming down the road, but we are still, those of us who are active in the hearing loss movement, 100% committed to getting more and more hearing loops installed. And of course, the advantage of the New York State requirement for telecoils is that those people then will be able to connect wherever there is a telecoil, wherever there is a hearing loop, which is why we want more and more people to know about the telecoil and have it activated by their audiologist.
This is Peter.
Right.
Jerry's absolutely right. The loop today is excellent technology. But Florence was wondering what we're looking towards in the future. Right. So what we have available today, loops are great, right? But the future may bring something different, and so that's what may be holding some people back from putting loops in, because we don't know what's going to be next year or the year after when it comes to Bluetooth. Bluetooth has been expanding rapidly. And
yes,
hearing aids today can have them, and they're not as expensive as they were 5 years ago. So,
right, and if I could add on to that, Peter, I agree with you, sir. The looping is really the best system we have now for larger groups overall because of the multiple manufacturers. The T-coil is a universal process. But just I want a little clarification that there is technology today that allows for large groups, large facilities, to actually receive audio signal via either near field Bluetooth. Starkey has a device which is a Starkey media streamer that can stream to hundreds of people in a large area. And other manufacturers have something like that. That's why it's proprietary. But as the technology improves, hopefully the manufacturers can put something out together that will do the same thing without bringing up the costs that looping involves.
let me add one more thing. With today's hearing aids, we're running into a situation where we are presented with a choice. They can either build a custom in-the-ear hearing aid with Bluetooth, or they can build it with a T-coil, but not both in the same device. And there are some behind-the-ear type devices which have one or the other, not both. So, you know, when we speak to people about what would you like to be able to do, answer your cell phone, your iPhone, right through your hearing aid, or do you want to be able to look for a loop and use it in a looped environment? And the majority of them say, I want the iPhone with the Bluetooth.
This is Jerry. We can talk offline, but I'm wearing a Bluetooth streamer, and I have T-coil enabled hearing aid and cochlear implants, so I have no difficulty doing both. If you don't give somebody a telecoil, there's no way they can connect with a loop system. If they don't
Correct.
have a Bluetooth enabled hearing device, they can get a streamer to their telecoil and receive the Bluetooth signal.
You're right, but not everybody is
Correct.
as adept as you are.
Well, if you tell them it's either or, you're forcing them to make a decision that they otherwise don't have to make.
I have a
can get
comment
both
from,
if they have a
Some
T-quil.
people don't want to wear this. That has been the objection right along, because we've had those things for a long, long time. All right, but people don't want to be saddled with one more thing to remember to put on when they leave for work. They just want the hearing aid in their ear. There's something else to
Okay,
drop.
but you can go out and buy this device. You can't go out and buy a telecoil. Your audiologist has to provide it.
That's true.
So,
I have a
and, you know,
comment.
We're all for the consumer making these informed decisions on
I
their
think
own
Ann,
based on
I
the
think
best
Ann and
knowledge.
Buffalo has a comment. Ann?
okay, I just want to make a comment on this discussion. So first of all, I think it's great that everyone is receiving the telecoil training because I think it's the gold standard. However, there are a lot of Bluetooth options available that are specific to the manufacturers that the consumer needs to be given information on both. The issue is the technology for Bluetooth is different through every manufacturer. It's already included in our regs because every audiologist and dispensing audiologist has to have so many continuing education hours in hearing aids. That's where you're going to get the Bluetooth training for each specific product. So, you know, New York State can't just say you have to have Bluetooth training. It's very, very general. It's actually tied to the training from that hearing aid where the telecoil is standalone. So I just want to make it clear the separation, and also I personally think it's every audiologist and dispenser, non-dispensing audiologist responsibility to make the consumer aware of the telecoil, yes, and Bluetooth options as well. And then let them decide whether they want a larger model that has everything or a smaller one. But every consumer should be given all the information, and then they can make the choice for themselves.
Correct.
I think you're right. I've had a loop system in my office for 26 years, and I can see the value of it. But I also can see that the technology is moving ahead rapidly, and so we're going to run into situations where I do believe Bluetooth is going to trump, and that I don't mean anything personal by that, but it's going to take over when it comes to assistive devices.
Right. And my comment is, you know, as the technology is always changing, it's our responsibility to talk to the patients about whatever's current. That's all we can do. We can only talk to them about what's currently available and keep on top of that, which we do through our continuing education and this telecoil training. So I think we have our bases covered as far as what we're requiring as far as dispensers and audiologists, the training that they need to accomplish that task. Unless anybody disagrees.
No.
No.
Thank you, everybody, for that discussion. It's, you know, it's an important topic, so it's good to hear everybody's opinion. So the next item is telecoil update, and that's going to be Denise. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is an agenda item we've probably discussed before, but I'm going to attempt to bring some of the new members up to speed and address the recent inquiry regarding what we've been doing to increase consumer awareness of the telecoil. A couple of years ago, we had a subcommittee that we formed, and they provided us with some recommendations, and we've been implemented most of the subcommittee's suggestions. One being the continuing education, the mandatory 1 hour, and the telecoil and assistive listening devices that Mark just spoke about. And then we also updated our online consumer guide, and we made a sign available to the public that also had a statement on there regarding, so the consumer would see when they went to the office that, you know, their dispenser should be discussing the telecoils with them and other assistive listening devices. That sign is available on the website. we sent out a notice to all the hearing aid businesses, along with a copy of the sign, and we provided links to where the sign could be found online, as well as the consumer brochures to help them find material that is approved by the department that they could disseminate to the consumer. And, you know, we generally don't receive complaints in this area, and we're attempting to keep the industry informed. Other than that, I don't really have much else to report. If anyone has any questions or would like a copy of the notice, if you haven't received one, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Is there any questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're done with the department and subcommittee reports. We're going to move on to action items, which we don't have any action items at this point. New business, we don't have anybody submitted any items for new business.
Can I ask something? Yeah. Is it okay? I'm not sure where this falls in the agenda, but I actually did want to bring something up to everyone's attention. Would this be an appropriate time to talk about it? So,
okay, sure. We'll talk new business. Normally what we do is we'll ask ahead of time if there's new business, but we can talk about it and then, you know, add it to new business for the next meeting if we need to do any kind of research on it. So
that's fine. So I think last time we brought up something about online at the previous meeting. So something came up between that time that I saw on some of the audiology forums, and I thought it was important to bring to the New York State Advisory Board attention since it is happening in New York State. So there is a website called listenlively.com, and I printed their address. They're located on 5th Avenue in New York. 10003 is the zip code. So one of the things that this site is doing that's interesting, is the word I'm going to use, is they're selling hearing aids online. But given that, you know, I learned that New York State has certain guidelines that we have to follow, for example, looking in the patient's ear prior to even discussing dispensing, and then everything that we just discussed, even the simple example of telecoils. So what's happening is you go on their website, you take an online hearing test, which we all calibrate our equipment when we have to do the hearing tests, and all the guidelines recommend a soundproof booth and so on. But now you don't need that. You take this online test, you take a 15-question questionnaire called Consumer Ear Disease Risk Assessment. And based on that, you can add to cart your hearing aid. But aside from purchasing this device, which is not new, I mean, we know there are hearing aids being sold online, you no longer need to go to any kind of provider because it will be programmed for you in the cloud. So there's no requirement whatsoever for you to be able to see an ENT, an audiologist, the hearing aid dispenser, and it's right in New York. So I'm not really sure what the proper question here should be, other than I'm just very curious how this is happening, and I am new to the board, so I don't know where to take this, but I'm definitely curious how this exists in New York. Does that kind of make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah.
So if anyone other than me have heard about this website, you know, whether it's Speak Up Now or later.
Well, we all know that they've been sending hearing aids to New York from Illinois for 100 years, okay? But what makes this situation unique is that apparently this provider is in New York, and he's servicing people in New York through the mail. And according to Article 37A, that's a no-no, as far as I understand. So we were just wondering if it's appropriate for us to bring this up, not wanting to look like we're sour grapes, Okay, but in New York we have this motto: if you see something, say something. And so we see things, and we're wondering what's the appropriate way to bring it to the attention of the rest of the people here who are concerned about the hearing health of our residents in New York State.
And it's a consumer awareness too, you know. So I know you guys spent a lot of time and put together a great consumer guide, but consumers are the ones that are going to be hit with this first because they're the ones that are seeing this. And from the forums that I was on, I've seen where someone's receptionist in an office took this test and she has normal hearing, but the site showed her she has a moderate loss. So, you know, it plays into this consumer protection. How do we know we're not damaging the hearing? Who's addressing all the red flags that, you know, we learn about? So aside from how it affects, you know, all the providers, I think the consumer aspect of it becomes important because if before you had third-party payers that still require you to go to an office to get the hearing aid fit, and I know technology is changing and, you know, we just kind of touched upon that, but where does the consumer play into this? So I think that whether, you know, you mentioned subcommittees or whatever it is, but I think this issue somehow has to get addressed.
I have a question from Buffalo. I think I know what the question is that you're looking to get answered. The question is, we have an enforcement committee that enforces consumer complaints, and we have a committee that audits current dispensing professionals to make sure they're fulfilling their responsibility as licensed professional. What we don't know is it the enforcement committee's responsibility to go after individuals who are dispensing without a dispensing license in New York State? That's the question, right?
Right. I think that what you have to do is we have to have the opportunity to look at the information that you're presenting to us, and if we feel that, you know, it's warranted, we'll open an investigation and look into it and do what we do with all of our complaints that for unlicensed activity, or we would determine whether they are licensed in another name or whatever. We really have to look at the information.
Right.
We haven't, enforcement.
No, I understand.
or
So I started compiling something. So if you could give me someone that I could send some of the stuff that I've already looked into, you know, who this should go to, I'd be happy to open up that.
Yeah, I would send it to Adea. Adea is our board coordinator.
Okay.
And she'll gather the information and then pass it on to the appropriate units and divisions. I'll look at it too, but it'll have to go to our enforcement group in council to determine, what's being done is, we've got to look into it, without looking into what information you have and whatnot. We can't really answer on it, we really got to look
I
at the
understand.
information.
I mean, I'm just
the first
bringing
step
it up.
is to get the information to our department, and we'll definitely look at it.
At the last meeting, it was mentioned that unless somebody brings it to the attention of the enforcement division, it's
Right.
not going to happen. So
that's what she's going to do. She's going to bring it to
Right.
Adea. Adea will, bring it to our enforcement unit and to our council.
yeah, because there are, most of the manufacturers that do have a way to adjust the hearing aids via, web-based or telehealth. But again, we're not including the care into the dispensing process, making sure there's no neuromas or anything else going on with the canal, as simple as earwax or perforation or something else. There's nothing to look at along those lines. So yeah, that's just why we have that. Otherwise, are we going to throw out the 7 deadly sins, as the FDA is not enforcing it anymore? If we're keeping it on the books, we should make sure that's taken care of.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next portion is the public comment period. So I'll go in Albany and see if anybody in Albany has any public comment. Is anybody here? Brad.
Hello, my I'm Fred Goosen. I'm a registered hearing aid dispenser in New York State for 24 years. I'm also the executive director of the Hearing Healthcare Alliance of New York. And as such, I have been running telecore courses now. This is our second year. We've run 3 of them so far, and I'm delighted to help out. And I'm also a member of the National Board for Certification Hearing Instrument Sciences in the International Hearing Society. On the last issue we were discussing about Listen Lively, or Lively Listen, they are obviously blatantly breaking the law in New York State. They are giving an online hearing test to dispense a hearing aid. There is no otoscopic observation. There is no testing of whether the possibility of a problem in middle ear or problem with a other than nerve damage loss. The same issue came up in many years ago with a company called High Health Innovations, started by a United Healthcare. International Hearing Society took them to court based upon the fact that they created a quote-unquote online hearing aid test. An online hearing aid test violates the state laws of 37 states. Because all by itself, you cannot dispense from that point, merely doing testing of tones and or speech without looking, without listening. So they forced the company to stop the online hearing test, and I believe that there is an FDA approval process, it's a 501k, something that requires such a test to be put forward and approved before they can use it for such an activity. The company owners, the head people, and also 3 people on the company, none of them are registered hearing aid dispensers in New York State, although the company is a registered hearing aid dispensing business listed by the Department of State. So it's actually doing business under an approved registration by New York State. I don't know where the next task is. It may be with the Attorney General's office. I don't know if a dispenser business such as myself has standing in such a case, and your attorney can answer that question. I'm not quite sure how that comes together, but I think that's very important. I'm delighted that someone brought this up because it's upsetting and quite right, and reaching millions of people with their advertising. Second point, I'd just like to ask for, and I think we've done it briefly, the subject matter of the complaints is important to me. The reason is I'm running a conference in a month and a half, and if I could have the rough kinds of, I'm not asking for specifics, I'm not asking for anything other than that, but what kinds of things are going wrong? What kinds of things are people doing incorrectly? Because I run the courses, I set up the courses. We have a session that Barbara Hearn, our attorney, runs on the law and how it is implemented, and it would be very helpful to us as we educate. Last year we had 176 hearing aid dispensing audiologists, and so we're not asking for specifics, Amy, we're not asking for specifics on it, but if 6 of them had to do with money, possibly 3 of them had to do with failure to assign that's not hung in the correct appropriate place, so on and so forth. That'd be very helpful to us when we are helping people understand what their legal obligations are under the law. But otherwise, thank you. I think it's been a very, very productive session. I'm delighted. It's even a forum. I've heard of those before. And once again, I thank Mark and all of you for helping us out, because we've had some people who got caught. He has advice. He has help in straightening some things out. And as always, thank you, Mark, and the entire staff.
Thank you, Fred. Is there anybody else in Albany that would like to speak? No? Okay, how about in New York? Is there anybody there that would like to speak? Okay, and Buffalo? Okay. All right, so that brings our meeting to a conclusion. I would like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting. All right, a second?
Second.
All in agreement? Okay. Thank you, everybody. That adjourns the meeting.